Okay, hello and welcome to the fifth and last session of our Cultivating Best Human Resource Practices series. Tonight we have two very experienced speakers who will teach us more about planning, delegation, and task management. After their presentation around 8 o'clock, we'll have some time for a Q&A, but feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat at any point. And just a reminder that the information shared tonight does not constitute legal advice. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Brianna, who's going to introduce us to our lovely speakers.
Yeah. So tonight we have Jasmine Bustard. Jasmine is a fifth-year field manager at Common Ground Farm, a certified organic market vegetable farm outside of St. Thomas. In her years farming at Common Ground, the farm has significantly increased its production and subsequently the size of its team. A key focus for Jasmine has been developing systems that shape the farm as a place of sustainable employment, which runs efficiently even with the increasing complexity of production. And we'll also hear from Renée Primeau. Renée Primeau is one of the 5 founding members of Turnstile Cooperative Farm, which produces organic vegetables, seeds, and cut flowers on 15 acres in Les Cèdres, Quebec. The farm is in its 20th season and has grown to 11 co-op members. Renée co-manages the vegetable team on the farm, where she strives to create a space where new and returning employees can find fulfillment, satisfaction, and joy at work. Renée loves teamwork and values a work environment that is fun, respectful, and stimulating for everyone. So we will pass it off to Jasmine to start. And just a reminder to both the speakers to let me know when you want me to change the slide as we go through the presentation. Okay, off to you, Jasmine.
Sounds good. Yeah, good evening, everyone. As Brianna mentioned, I'm Jasmine. And yeah, so to start off here, a well-managed farm starts with a good plan. So we have here with our farm plan, that's a holistic document setting down your values and goals to guide your decisions and actions. That will flow into a business plan, which puts your farm plan into action, including budget considerations and hired labor, which then would flow into your crop plan, including calculating labor required per crop. And lastly, a labor plan. So a labor plan that allows for both you and your staff to anticipate the farm's labor needs, seasonal projects, weekly plan, and day-to-day priorities. The impact of your decisions and how mechanization factors into that. How and when you plan, how and what you plan to delegate, and then the availability of labor. So on our farm, I've seen a few examples about, particularly in the business plan stage, where to start. There's some people who take sort of like the money you need to make for the year, for example, and work backwards from that. What are your business expenses going to be, and how much can you allocate for labor, resulting in how much labor can you have? We, for example, on our farm, because we have some data from past seasons, we look at this in terms of we take our hours recorded from last year and we compare them to projected hours from this year. So in that context, we're looking not so much as labor expense, but hours recorded. And then, for example, if in our business plan, we want to make a 5% increase, for example, we're making sure that's reflected in both our crop plan. We are actually growing 5% more, approximately 5% more plants. And then in our labor plan, we're looking at last year and this year, with the staff we have available, does that look like an appropriate amount of labor? Do the numbers line up? And do the numbers line up with a 5% increase? Yeah, so and then because we're looking at this on a basis of month to month, specifically for the labor plan. And one thing we started doing a few years ago, when we encountered a couple of situations where we, for example, were way above what we expected to the amount of hours we expected to record to spend on the farm that month. We actually started looking at this every single month, even more than once a month, to both make sure we're on track and then also evaluate, it acts as a cue to evaluate mid-season. Is the plan working out? Are there things that we didn't factor in that we need to both in the current season and when planning at the outset for the next season? So yeah, that's what we do on our farm. What I really like about this slide here is that the farm plan flows into developing your business plan, to the crop plan, to the labor plan, and then it comes all back around to the farm plan. What I really like about that is that it's, and I find is true, is that if we, for example, that because this works in a system, if we, for example, in our crop plan make some major changes, reductions or additions, that it's a cue to then reevaluate our labor plan, maybe in turn reevaluate the crop plan. Again, for example, if the business plan, like we, one year when we added a new market mid-season, which is a really big thing to do, but if you added a new market mid-season, you do need to account for that in the rest. So then you're looking at your crop plan and subsequent your labor plan. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to touch on there, Brianna. If you can move to the next slide. Yeah, so a successful season requires planning. So before the season starts, we want to map out our labor needs, like I touched on in the last slide, identify seasonal and periodic tasks in a journal or spreadsheet. So as a manager supervisor, you understand what the more nitty-gritty of the seasonal flow is going to look like, create a production schedule, and then identify roles and responsibilities. So this, I know this one says before the season starts. We're also doing this all of the time though. So we talked about mapping the labor needs. When we identify, when we're looking at the seasonal and periodic tasks, one thing, for example, happens on our farm is we look at spring as often. That's our building project time. So that might be if, for example, one year we bought we wanted to redo our wildlife exclusion fence. We did sit down with a spreadsheet and look at how many hours did we anticipate that was going to take. And then it actually meant that we hired people earlier in the year. And then you have to balance those things too with not just how much time it will take, but do the staff members I'm going to have, are they trained on these tasks? Are they someone with more senior experience is going to have to do, and other people can't be involved. So there's also a delegation consideration there. And another example from our farm too would be fall harvest is another seasonal task that we need to look at. So because we store a lot of vegetables over the winter, we're looking at very closely the labor we need in the fall because we need a lot more hands on deck to get everything out of the field. Yeah, we look at that based on past data, like data from past years. But we are, also anticipating that increase in labor by not just hiring people for when we need the help, but also hiring them. Sometimes we hire folks a few weeks before we know we have a really big increase to get them on track. So when we hit our big production bump, everybody's on the same page and we have some foundational training already done. Yeah, so then creating a production schedule. On our farm, the example here is what days do you harvest, what days do you reserve for projects and crop maintenance. We find it really useful. We use really big whiteboards on our farm extensively. And we do have a schedule of, what things always need to happen on Monday, always need to happen on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's color coded. It's very big and easy for the crew to read and read and see. It's not usually a list we're checking things off on, but it does both offer kind of an accelerated training, or it functions and it helps people accelerate their training because it's easier to get a sense of our weekly flow when it's very clearly outlined. But it also works. It helps folks in a more experienced role where they can look at it, make sure we are hitting the things that we need to do every day. And when we're planning the rest of the day's tasks, we you just have a better comprehensive look at what all needs to be done. Yeah, so throughout the season, we're going to create weekly and daily plans so staff are kept in the loop and update our plans to match on the ground realities. I think we want to go to the next slide, and then there's a couple examples there. Yeah, so this is a weekly planning template, very similar to what we use on the farm. So there's greenhouse chores you can see at the top. That would be an example of needs to be done every day, and then also a couple examples of pack shares, CSA, and garbage and recycling, things that need to be done on specific days of the week. We shied away from outlining some of these like regular tasks at the outset because I think out of a perception that maybe the longer people are on the crew, they'll get a sense for it anyway. They'll learn things as we go. And actually what we found is that it's way easier for people to integrate if these things are all just laid out. To take it a step further too, by assigning specific people to these tasks, we can it gives people better perspective on who is doing what needs to be done. And then, for example, if somebody's away, we know we need to attend to the thing, Eric's regular Monday task or Michael's regular Wednesday task, if somebody's not on the crew. Yeah, if Brianna, you could go to the next slide too. Okay, so there's a couple examples of whiteboards here. I think the green board, the blackboard at the bottom there is actually Renee's. And the two whiteboards are from our farm. So the specific examples of how we use things, the big on the top right, there's the big whiteboard and then a smaller one. So the smaller one under the buy local sign, this is kind of on the edge you can see that's where we're recording our weekly tasks. So the things that need to be done, every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday. And then the main section there is sort of our catch-all where we'll record, different specific tasks. And then to sort of avoid overwhelming people or even ourselves sometimes with how much there is to do, I'll take the marker and put a star beside the specific things that need to be done that day. So those are kind of like one-off tasks that need to be done on that day. So yeah, in our weekly flow, a key thing that I do every week is on Monday as early as possible. I'll go around and do a field walk. And I'm looking at recording field prep, transplanting, weeding, trellising and pruning, anything else that needs to be done in a week, record it all on a piece of paper, and then get back to the barn, and I'll transfer it all onto these whiteboards. And then eventually that piece of paper I had in the field gets into a binder, so we have it, kept safely for a record. But yeah, I kind of put things into lists here. So I put, you can see on this big whiteboard there, I have a list for field prep. That one I'm typically organizing by the implement that needs to be on the tractor for ease of, tractor operator use. And then for weeding and transplanting, on the left side of the screen there, I have an example, a zoomed up example of our weeding list. And I wanted to highlight this because this is a system we started using more so this year. So I'll take my weeding list, and first I list things by the field section. So you can see, for example, A2, that's one of our field sections. And then I'll list the tool that the team needs, versus in B2 we needed hand weeders, um, and then whatever weeding task it is. So and then the last thing that I do once I have everything recorded is I'll write down the priorities, and that's the circled number on the left-hand side there. So that has really helped us because it both once I get the whole list written down, can kind of sit with it and go through and write what things do we actually want and need to do in what order. Um, so both useful for me as a manager, but also for our crew. And in the beginning of the season, for example, with our weeding list, I'll work more directly with the crew. And that's when we're doing training about like what does effective weeding look like, how to manage your time effectively in a task like that. And then as the season goes on, what we found is generally my time gets a little more stretched. I have a little bit more field seeding to do and independent tasks. But by that time, if I've invested the time into training the team really well, what we were able to do by the end of the season is I'll get all this on the whiteboard and I'll verbally go through this list with the team. But then they were able to take a picture and, like I said, by the end of the season, almost totally autonomously like execute this weeding list. And that was really great because it having a really clear plan like this allowed me to be able to step away and have flexibility to get things that I needed to do on my own completed. And also gives the team autonomously like autonomy and agency. They know how to weed, they know what needs to be done. They don't need somebody micromanaging them, being with them the whole time. Totally capable of doing it on their own. So yeah, this system's worked really well. We are still in communication with each other basically all the time. We use walkie-talkie radios on our farm. So we're still, communicating when I know we've, made it to C2 where we're weeding basil. I sometimes I have questions about like how bad are they, or what types of weeds are we most seeing there? So we're still in communication, but this has allowed us a lot more flexibility. Um, yeah, I think that was most of what I had to say on the whiteboards here. One thing I will kind of my closing note here is that whiteboards are a lot of work. And I think we initially shied away from them because they are a lot of work to maintain. And sometimes with, different weather conditions or absences, different whatever happens in the week, things can change really rapidly. And sometimes it felt like, oh, we're writing things down. This is a lot of work. But we've seen like the kind of return on investment, the has been incredible. Like our team being able to see, understanding everything that needs to happen, the things that they specifically need to do. It provides both perspective and agency to crew members. So yeah, it's been a totally invaluable tool on our farm. Um, yeah, I think that was the mo what I had to add there. Did Renee, I think you had some to add on the your whiteboard system as well, or green
Yeah,
board.
sure. So yeah, I'm also a big proponent of having the information out there for people to see. So we've got one giant board, which is this green board here that you can see. This is a picture taken from like end of the season when it's pretty sloppy looking. But anyway, the idea is the days of the week. We have one weekly meeting that happens every Monday. And the entire veg team, sorry, I'm talking veg team because our farm also has seed production and stuff as well. So all the employees working on the vegetables will all meet together to look at what the weekly and set the weekly priorities. So we have days of the week up at the top, and on the side, I've got color coded. It's kind of hard to see, but different categories. Also, it's in French. Our farm, we're in Quebec, so we function our meetings are in French, but we have different categories so that people can get a visual, I guess, of what in general is going on in the different categories of the farm, such as, greenhouses, harvest, weeding, that kind of thing. We also have, different people are responsible for different things, so they can be looking at the section that really affects them perhaps more. So this board is where we set, broad strokes for the week, but then we also have areas on this board where we'll have more detailed, such as the weeding priorities. We have a section for that, or like a to buy list is a really helpful one I find, where you run out of batteries or little things, people can write it up there. And when somebody's going to the hardware store, they can just take a picture of the to buy list and make sure to get everything all at once, rather than like, having to go back for another thing. We also have another Blackboard that's our daily board we have dispatch meetings every day. And we actually have a mini one in the morning and a mini one right after lunch. And because, we're a big team, and also with weather, things can change. You thought you had one plan going forward, and then the weather changed, and finally we're going to pivot and do something else this afternoon. So that gives us a chance to make that change. And in that dispatch meeting, what I'm putting on the board there is really just like the tasks, and the teams, so that people can see, okay, what's your first task that you're going to be doing, your second task, and your third task. There might be 3 different tasks and the different teams that you're going to be working with. And so that you can see, okay, so this is what I'm up to this afternoon. So I'm going to want to bring, these tools, but then later on, I want to make sure that I bring these tools for the job I'm going to do later. Or it's also an opportunity to say, okay, before I go off on to do that next job, like mid-afternoon, I should check in with Renée right now about where I can find the information to complete that task. So people can I'll say, okay, so we've got this is what's going on. I'll just want to talk to so-and-so about this before you all head out. Or, I'll try and facilitate some other people talking together if need be. But having this daily dispatch board allows us to just make more on the fly changes. I think we could move on to the next slide. So this is taken from one of the protocols. We've got a lot of different protocols that I've been working on over the last several years to make task management more clear for employees. So this is like a big job, as I said, that I've been working on. So it's not maybe something that you can do all in one year, but each year I try to get more things written down, because it really does make things easier for the team. So both in terms of knowing what works well for a job, knowing what tools we like to use. It can be like, this is an example of, so we have all of our vegetables are basically listed like this with, the bed prep. Is it a direct seeded crop? Is it a transplanted crop? What weed control do you use then into maybe if it's like trellising techniques, or maybe you want to make mention of pests and diseases that are prominent for that particular vegetable. Then on to harvest techniques, and also, materials that you need. So this can be useful for people that are either taking on new responsibilities. They can refer to this to be able to get more in-depth knowledge. We use protocols. So as I said, these ones are specific to vegetables, but we have protocols listed for different field operations too. If there's tasks that you do, maybe it's just once every year. Like for us, we do a rotation with our caterpillar tunnels. So we set them up each year. And so I have our protocols listed and all the different tools you need for the different steps, so that this helps to be clear about what the tasks are, but it also helps people to be able to know what tools to bring out to the field with them. And they can participate and be, rather than waiting for you to tell them what to do or what to get, they can look themselves to see what they need to bring with them. It's also a helpful tool in terms of reminders for yourself for a job that we only do once a year. It's like, oh, damn, what is it? You don't want to be out in the field and go, oh, I forgot to bring this one particular thing that we discovered is really useful for this particular operation. So it can be helpful for everyone. I could have the next slide, please. So I am definitely really big on delegating. We have a big team on our farm, and I think people like to have responsibilities and roles. But I think in terms of delegating, delegation works a lot better when it is structured and when you are clear about what types of results you want seen, and also if there's a training period that's going into, training somebody into take on a specific delegation, rather than, if you just go and tell somebody to go and do something, you're more likely to just perhaps there's a lot more room for error in terms of what the expectations are of the end result, for example. And then, if you feel frustrated, it's really not that person's fault if you're not very clear about what you want for the end result. So for us, what delegation looks like, first of all, I certainly like to give people actual roles. And with those roles comes like how to train them in for a particular role. So I'll break down I've spent time during the off season to think about, okay, what are the different tasks that I want that person to be responsible for? So you can take any particular role, for example, managing the seedling greenhouse. And so you can think about the different steps that are involved, how to make potting soil, how to do the seeding, watering seedlings, monitoring the temperature in the greenhouse. These are all steps that I like to lay out and I like to train somebody on. And then I like to be clear about when it is that I am handing over the responsibility to that person. Because that part is really, really key. Being clear about what that period is of training. Then you might have a shadowing period, and then you're actually handing over the responsibility. Because first of all, it's just important to be super, super clear. Am I thinking about that, or are you thinking about that? So, it's watering seedlings in the afternoon when it was cloudy and we didn't think that we were going to have to need to water in the afternoon. But then the sun came out. So who is it that's thinking about that now? And so it's important, when I say to the person who's taking on that role, there will come a point where I'm going to be like, okay, so at this point, this is on you now. I want you to be thinking about the afternoon watering. And I'll even have a period of a week where I'll say, okay, so this week, what I want you to do is I want you to walkie me on the walkie-talkie to say, okay, I'm heading off to water the greenhouse. It's slightly overcast, so it looks like this, and I'm thinking about doing this. Just to let me know that they're on track, they've thought about it, and it's just sort of it's like the transfer period. And then once that week's done, then I'm saying, okay, that you're good to go. Now it's on you. So I like to be clear about delegating. Just especially because micromanaging, Jasmine referred to that earlier. Nobody likes that. And I think that don't underestimate how worthwhile it is to put time into the training period, because that is the period when people are open to receive feedback, when they're ready to learn, make improvements. They don't mind that you're giving them corrections at that point. But later on, when you've already handed over responsibility to someone, it's no longer the time to say, oh, actually, I think it would be better if you did it this way. Nobody likes that at that point. It's sort of too late then. So it's really important to spend the time earlier on when you are in the training period. Here we talk about, the first line here is about performance and development plan. So this has to do with, setting up trainings and doing evaluations. We definitely want people taking on roles rather than having robots that are just doing the job. Encouraging worker agency. So some of those protocols that I showed you earlier can help people to take on their own, make decisions. They know where to look for things, and giving clear roles is another way of allowing people to have worker agency. listening is very, very important. So we do regular check-ins with our staff about the training process. So these check-ins that we do on our firm at first, some of them are just to see, how is it going? Check in about their well-being, but it's also an opportunity to check in about the actual training. And at that, I'll say like, okay, so in the next 2 weeks, I want us to look at this. You're going to learn this. And at that point, that's usually when I hand over, I'll say, okay, and at this point, I'm going to say that you've learned this now. And so you're going to be responsible for it. Focus on retention. So it's important to keep things interesting for your long-term staff. And one way to do this is to balance, give new opportunities, new things for people to learn. So with these different roles and responsibilities, sometimes people will take on new roles from one year to the next. Sometimes it'll be deepening that particular role, but and other times it'll just be like, okay, maybe it's time for you to switch it up and learn something new on the farm, take on a new role. This keeps it interesting for people. We also, in some of our trainings, we'll talk about it being over like a 2 or 3 year period. And, for example, different tractor work, there's different tractor operations that are reserved for only 2nd and 3rd year employees. We do a season review with our team to look at different highlights, challenges that went on during that season. And we also talk about improvements for next year. Visioning is a way that you can do that in the fall, or you can have meetings through the winter, and that could be an opportunity to engage your returning employees and have them be part of seeing how you're going to make changes for the upcoming meetings and making your plan. Maybe you're involving them in your crop planning meetings, or just different planning meetings that have to do with your production. Brianna, can you flip to the next slide, please? So this is an example of somebody's performance and development plan. We have another sheet that we do, but we do evaluations partway through the season. And that is usually very well received from people. People like to have feedback. I participated in a workshop on a whole session about feedback. And the take-home message was, any feedback is better than no feedback at all. People really enjoy having feedback. And so, if you can be really specific about it, even better. Try and give some constructive criticism, give actual goals that you want people to work on. That can be really, really helpful. People really like that. But it's also a time to reassure. Sometimes we forget that people don't necessarily realize that they're doing well. This can be especially prominent in a situation where you might have a very experienced team, but you've got a couple new people. Well, those new people, they are comparing themselves to the very experienced team. So they might see themselves as being slow and like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing very well. We, on the other hand, know that they are new employees, and perhaps we see them as being like, wow, this person's doing so great, like, look how fast they're learning this or that. But if you don't tell them, then they don't know. So this is a really important time to be able to spend some time to give some feedback. Jasmine, did you have anything you wanted to say about evaluations on your farm, or?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Yeah, we well evaluate early and often, I guess, is one of the approaches too. We're developing a more formal evaluation process because of the feedback we're getting from employees, because people, exactly as you mentioned, people don't always know how they're doing. So we're talking about having something written down. We don't have it yet. But we definitely do. We're checking in with especially new employees a lot very early on. But we do also really try and make a concerted effort to meet with longer term employees or existing employees, especially as new seasons roll around and talking about like what do they want to learn on the farm, what do they want to accomplish, especially for people who are with you for more than one season. Sometimes the answer will surprise you. So for somebody who, kind of knows what they're doing on the farm, we got a good sense of how, how things work. I've only seen positive results from giving them agency and responsibility over their own, like to a degree, right? Because we still have the, minimum production things we need to accomplish. But in giving people agency over what they're going to learn, what they're going to experience, and integrating that wherever we can. Yeah.
Brianna, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so continuing with a delegation, different practices that can be really great are clear communication, which I was talking about earlier. So you want to set the team up for success by being clear and precise with your directives. This can be, if you're sending people out, this can be also just for delegating smaller jobs. If you're sending somebody out to do a weeding job, you might want to be clear. Is this a really kind of like a quick and dirty weed job that you're looking for, or are you wanting them to get absolutely every weed because maybe this is a crop that's going to be there for a long period of time and you want it done really well? So being clear about, the quality, the time is can be really helpful. Walkie-talkies, we use them as well. Can be really great for just sometimes also you send somebody out to do a job, they get out there and they go, I'm not really sure. I think maybe it looks differently than what Renee thought it looked like. Things have changed since this one has been on the board for a little while, and I think things have evolved. Maybe I better check in about it. So, having that there can be another way to just clarify what that expectation is of the job. Perhaps it's changed. Sharing the vision. So having structures that encourage the team to hold the big picture through check-ins or these weekly meetings. They see where you're going is really great. We have a finish the day together kind of policy where we try to help people wrap up their tasks so that everybody can finish things up together. Even though, we work on time management, encourage people to be very good with their own time management, but sometimes unforeseen things happen and you find yourself with something that might be taking a lot longer than you expected. So it's really nice to help people wrap up together. Team dynamics. So this is important to assign the right amount of people to a given task. For example, when you're delegating, you're going to lose a lot of respect if you send one person or two people out to do something that's really like a 4 or 5 person job. It's going to be discouraging for them. They're going to lose trust in you because they're going to be like, man, like, why did we get this? It's a downer. So it's important to think about what that job is and make sure you have the right amount of people for that job. Flip side is also don't send like 10 people when really just 2 people could do it. Like you don't want people feeling like they're wasting their time either. That's not a good feeling either. Also being attentive to who works best together. Let's be honest, like with teamwork, there are different personalities that might be working better together. So it is important to keep that in mind when you set your teams. Respected leadership. So this is maintained through appropriate delegation, encouragement, and listening. For sure, I think that, you have to model things, what you want yourself as well. Like if you're looking for people to be arriving on time every day, well, you too need to be on time and ready before everybody comes. Respecting everyone and their limits. You want to value your team, respect their work hours and their own limitations. You want to also listen to their input and their concerns. These are all really important to instill when you are practicing delegation. Can we see the next slide, please?
Great. Yeah, so I was going to speak on this one. Yeah, encouraging productivity and efficiencies. A lot of different approaches, and I wanted to share some examples from our farm. But yeah, the first one here, tracking productivity, setting targets for task completion. And then the second one there is more about request staff to maintain records and data collection. So I look at these in two different kind of two different approaches. The first one is more like setting kind of benchmarks and cues so that we can make good decisions. And versus the second one, when we do data collection, it's more for like understanding our general cost of production so we can make bigger picture decisions on the farm. So for an example in the first one there, setting targets for task completion. So as Renee just mentioned, really, really important to understand or try and get a better picture the more and more you do this of how long things will take. You can't always be right, but having some good benchmarks is really useful. And the reality is benchmarks don't always make people feel good if it comes from a place of micromanaging and micromanaging and sort of this like pass fail attitude. Um, but so I really encourage people to be really open, really transparent about why we're setting different benchmarks, why we're saying, for example, how many bunches is appropriate to do in a certain amount of time, why we're recording records, why we're recording data to understand cost of production. So, for example, a key target for task completion that we use on our farm is we say a bunch per minute for a harvest task. So, for example, if we're harvesting, we have 80 bunches of radishes to harvest. I want I would probably set 4 people on that. So if I had 4 people on that harvest task, it should take about 20 minutes. And we say 20 minutes start to finish. That includes, getting your crates, counting elastics, coordinating who's going where, and getting things back to the wash station to get cold. So a couple of reasons I would say 4 people for 80 bunches is 20 minutes is firstly, that's a good amount of time to, be able to get into a harvest task, but we're not spending too long because, if we have 2 people and they're spending 40 minutes is a long time on a fast-paced harvest task. So kind of pace of work can wane, morale can wane. It's not good for everybody. But 20 minutes is great because it's fast, but not too fast. And it also means that I also don't want harvested vegetables, sitting in the field for too long before going it back to the wash station. So that's the other function of that sort of 20 to 30 minute for a large harvest task. That framework means the first radish bunches we made are not sitting in the field for longer than 20 minutes. So that's our basic framework for that. But it also offers a cue, say, if we have folks doing a harvest task and they encounter lots of aphids, or maybe there's powdery mildew that we didn't catch when we're doing our harvest estimate, or a lot of weeds, or there's some other factor, maybe I don't know, we don't have the right tools or something. There's some other factor we encounter that's going to make the harvest task take a lot longer. It offers a cue. We know we're about halfway through. We're not going to finish in 20 minutes. We train our team to know we get on the radio and earlier rather than later, start workshopping the problem. Sometimes that means that an experienced crew member is going to go out and make a call or discuss the problem, the conditions with the crew in person. Or sometimes we can just work it out over the radio. As we touched on radios earlier, I would say radios, walkie-talkies, number one tool for farm efficiency, or at least or one of the most useful tools that we use to be able to communicate really quickly. It's also very democratizing. Everybody can hear what's going on. Everybody knows where everybody else is at. When I was a new farmer, listening to conversations from more experienced folks over the radio helped me learn really, really fast, helped me put all the pieces together really quickly. So that was sort of a side note on that. But yeah, when we're gathering data, the other point here, gathering data, this I more look at is uh, we more do so when we're trying to collect data to create a cost of production. And our staff know that. We try and do Google Forms when we do this sort of data collection because it's really easy for people to use. And then we can analyze the data on another page. But again, the whole point here is be really open about why we're collecting the types of data we are. We talk about these things at our weekly meetings, is really key. So people know, like they're not evaluations. It's more so we can figure out like cues and benchmarks to figure out when we need to do something differently, when we need to make a call. So yeah, and then the motivation section at the bottom here, we have adapt what your staff find motivating. You know your staff better than anybody else. We love friendly competition on our farm. Humor, music in the field is great. I do think the next note here, model productivity and approach. The manager is the number one person setting the tone of the workplace and how the attitude in the field. So if you're walking in frustrated and angry, very stressed out, the team will notice. So sometimes it's about, kind of checking yourself and reevaluating, thinking about the big picture, and coming back in with the approach that you would want your supervisor, your manager to have, right? So yeah, another tip we use for modeling productivity and approach is we like to say you narrate what you're doing, right? Or narrate what you're thinking. So if I'm approaching, setting a crew up with in harvesting from a planting of kale, for example, when I'm introducing the task, instead of saying, I think you should go to the south end, you should work to halfway, and then maybe we're going to go over here, or get your first bunches from there, and then get 10 bunches from there and then move over there. Instead, I'm going to narrate what I'm saying by saying, okay, so I know that we started from the north end last time and we got about halfway and then we encountered aphids. So we know we checked from our harvest estimate that during our harvest estimate that on the south end there's a few more leaves and we want to exhaust what we can from this planting before we mow it and move on to the next one. So it's kind of in the same vein as putting all your priorities out on your whiteboard, talking about these things in the team meeting. It's the key is letting the team in on, the things that the secret ways that we're deciding what's important, right? Sometimes these things are just happening, especially if you're, a senior manager, sole manager, leader in the field. Sometimes these decisions are happening in your head, but letting the team in on your decision-making process both provides perspective, but also helps them learn how to make those decisions for themselves too. So yeah, we discussed observing staff and checking in. I time and time again, there things will happen that you won't anticipate. So it's really, really important to foster, by saying explicitly also, but also by acting out your values, that we should have really consistent communication in the field, right? I'm checking in, seeing how things are going, especially if, a task is taking longer than we expect it to. But also that employees, staff, team members, they're providing feedback back, saying even positive stuff. We got to we got to the carrot planting. The weeds are actually this is going way faster than we thought it would. Any communication is positive communication. And especially when it's positive, because then sometimes when we hit snags, things don't go how we were expecting them to go. People feel more empowered that it's, communication is welcome. Um, yeah. Yeah, the empowerment piece, I think that's what I was talking about, touching on a little bit before, letting people in on the whys of why we're recording information, why we need to all the different things on our to-do list. Um, yeah, bringing out the fun, be the most exciting person in the field. We did have a story from the fall. We had, one of our full harvest days, we're, desperately trying to get everything out of the field before it freezes. It's like temperatures dropping, raining sideways, all this stuff. And I looked at our team and I said, repeat after me. I don't have to work in an office. And
Mhm.
somebody else went, I don't have to be a cashier. I don't have to. And I mean, the humor you use depends on your team and what the relationship that you guys have. But these things are always, be the most positive person in the field. It makes the that that attitude, it bleeds into everybody else. We're all choosing, I'm assuming everybody's here choosing to farm, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's just important to remember why we're doing it. Yeah. Um yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say on that slide. Brian, if you could go to the next one. Yeah, and mechanization is a little bit different than what we've talked about before. But there's a lot of places on the farm where mechanization, not just because of both because of the financial aspect, it can make things a lot more efficient, but also it can make it more efficient, sustainable for your team. So a couple things to look out for. So we want to map where you're spending the most time. Another way that I would say this is identify the bottlenecks in your weekly flow. We want to consider retention and hiring challenges and what are the tasks that nobody likes doing. So a couple examples from our farm in the last couple of years. So the map where you're spending the most time, identify bottlenecks. One key one we identified is that we needed a drop seeder for seeding trays, right? So this was a time that, we kind of got used to the Tuesday afternoon, seeding's not done, we really need seeding done. Okay, we're just gonna throw 6 people on the seeding task, everybody's hand seeding, Salanova lettuce, and we're just trying to get it done before the end of the day. And sometimes these, kind of habits we get into, we get used to them. But when we stepped back and looked at, okay, where are we the most stressed in the week? This was one of the number one things that came up. And basically, we did a very, very simple cost analysis. It required some data collection. So we were clear with the team. We're considering whether this is not appropriate for the farm and trying to identify like what type of equipment is appropriate to do this. So we collected some data. And then it was very, very clear that a drop seeder was within reach. And now, both very stressful and high labor task has become something that, as Renee talked about, giving people independent jobs and things that they can do with agency. It's now also one of those tasks where one person can handle it start to finish, and kind of develop efficiencies and really dive into that task. and learn a lot from that. So that's been great. Another really good example from our farm this year, a bottleneck was with our admin, the time we were spending on admin. So it that was one of the things, is taking time away from kind of our senior management team, because we had to do so much on the back end, in organizing our CSA subscription, and then just replying to folks' emails. So maybe not the mechanization advice you were hoping to hear tonight, but it is a tool. So by basically what we did was streamline our admin process. We developed a new interface for us to use. And that's been a um, really surprising positive. That's opened up so much time for us. So yeah. Retention and hiring challenges, and then the tasks no one likes doing. This is really important, and you get this information by talking to your staff. One thing we've identified is that the way we harvest tomatoes, the way we harvest zucchini. I think anybody who grows zucchini probably feels a similar way. It's pretty laborious. The way we were doing it was not super ergonomic. It became really clear that we needed to do something different. The tool we invested in was a really simple gorilla cart, and improved things very, very quickly. Um, but yeah, when we're talking about big equipment, our best example from our farm as well is our carrot harvester, right? So the things I've talked about before are kind of small equipment tools, but our carrot harvester, for example, carrots are very high labor, and because we want to store a lot of vegetables over the winter, people always wanted carrots. We would never be able to grow the volume of carrots we do if we didn't have the harvester that we do. So um, this was another, again, it's not we didn't do anything very special except look at, the cost of the harvester and the payback period, and then the labor we were spending on the carrots at that time we were currently growing. And the answer was very clear. And actually, by doing that analysis, we've been able to, and then getting the harvester, we've been able to grow way more carrots now because we have this tool, and then discovered other benefits, like the fact that we can harvest more than carrots with it, and all these other things. So, yeah, it all goes back to this cost of production analysis. Don't like We used to record a lot more data, but try and identify the things that are creating the most tension on your farm, and we record the data on those things. So not on everything, just the things that are going to move the needle the most, your biggest crops, your biggest problems, your biggest challenges, and put, numbers behind your decisions rather than feelings is the approach there. Yeah, we can go to the next slide there. I think this is an example of the crop enterprise budget. Um, so there's a lot of little numbers there, but the idea here is we can allocate uh, allocate dollars to the effort we're putting in. And it's sometimes can be intimidating. This isn't from our farm, but what I will say is sometimes these numbers can be really intimidating. But when you start collecting data, it's not so bad. And I'd encourage anybody to do it. But yeah, I think I covered most of these things in the last slide, actually, but so I think we can probably move on to the next one for Renee.
So, delegation mistakes. So, things don't always go as planned, especially when we delegate tasks. But it's important to foster a resilient environment where mistakes won't destabilize the entire system. So here are some productive strategies for addressing mistakes and building trust. Depersonalize responsibility by using team-based language and seeing where the system went wrong. So this is definitely something that we do on our farm. I talk about when something happens, we talk about a mistake that happened rather than so and so accidentally tilled in the cilantro. It's just like, oh, well, the cilantro got tilled in. So it's really just about changing your language. Because here's the thing, with any mistake, there's usually way more factors that involved way more people that came to that led to that mistake. So for example, perhaps the seating lines weren't, maybe the person who did the bed prep didn't do clear lines. Like there were various steps along the ways that can lead to that particular mistake that happened. And so I guess what I'm just trying to say is that generally speaking, there are way more people who are kind of to blame, I guess, as it were, than just one person. It's important to just depersonalize it in general. You want to frame mistakes as opportunities for growth and learning, both theirs and yours. So for sure, for absolute sure, when mistakes happen, most often it's an indication that you need to clarify either some way that you're explaining something or a system on your farm, maybe having more signage up as like little reminders for people. For example, a few years ago, we had an employee that nearly put fuel in the radiator tank, I believe, when she was trying to fuel up the tractor. And the person who was responsible for machinery was like, he could not believe that this person almost did that. And I was like, well, I think if you think about it, like they're on different locations on the different tractors. And I really think we just need to have this as like, we have a sheet that has different, it's one of the aspects of the tractor training and a reminder that they're at different locations, and like we can just have an image that says, or we could put a label on there that says, radiator. I don't know, just like, it's just, for me, it's an indication that, we need to be more clear with signage and training, things like that. Taking ownership of your own mistakes, very important. I think that also when someone makes a mistake on the farm, they feel badly. Like that is just how it goes. And so I think that, first of all, you never want to make somebody feel worse, like they're already feeling badly. But second of all, it's important to let them know that, other people are making mistakes too, including yourself. Sometimes I'll highlight certain things that I've done on the farm that can seem like pretty big mistakes, that just happened, accidents. And just in terms of, just reminding people that we can have a bad day and it's not, something can just happen like that. So it is for sure, health and safety mistakes can have the most serious consequences. So really important to for sure put a lot of effort into setting up either systems that in place so that big health and safety accidents don't happen. Making sure that you have the right precautionary equipment or tools, etc. But otherwise, if it's not about someone being injured and it's just about perhaps an inconvenience, well, then it's important to just remember, okay, nobody got injured here. What can we learn from this particular mistake? Brianna, you can move to the next slide, please. Retention. Okay, so farm workers move on from jobs for a variety of reasons, many of which are beyond your control. Return workers bring value to your farm through increased efficiency, competency, and dedication. So this is definitely something that we have learned on our farm, that it's just amazing to have people coming back year after year. In the early years, we were focused a lot more on just having a person come for one season. We would train them so that they might go and start their own farm. And then we realized, actually, it's pretty great when you start getting people returning year after year. you don't have to go through that whole big period in the spring where you're, spending so much time training. These, already that you get along with these people. Team dynamics are really not to be taken for granted. And when you have team members that really gel well together, that's really special and it's worth fostering. So I think that encouraging people to come back, retention is really, really something that you want to be doing. And there are different elements that can lead to people wanting to stay at your farm. So job satisfaction and responsibility. What I hear from people. So first of all, I just want to say that on our farm, we have this currently right now, we had 100% of the people that worked last year are coming back next year. We have somebody that's going on maternity leave, so we do actually have to hire a new person. But just to say that we do have high retention in general in our firm. And what people tell me is that the biggest feedback I get is job satisfaction and these responsibilities that we give to people have a huge impact on why people are happy and feel motivated to come to work year after year. And the fact that they can either learn new skills or deepen skills is a huge thing that you can do. So spending that time creating those roles or spending the time training people, it really pays off, because then if you have them coming back for another year, just think about it. They're going to be even better at that job. You might think to yourself, mechanical cultivation, it's something that I feel like I can only do. I'm so, it's finessing and all of that. Well, I'll be honest, like so many of these types of jobs, we used to say on our farm, it wasn't for like a first year employee, or like we couldn't delegate it. How do you train somebody? How do you can. And it's really about setting guidelines and also maybe not having them do all of the things at first. Maybe you pick the easier things. It's like perhaps cultivating the beans with the basket weeder is an easier task. Save some of the finger weeding of the carrots might be a little bit later on. But these are things that you can actually break down into smaller bites, and it's worth it. People get so excited to take on these new tasks. They get better at them, and then they come back the next year and they're even better at them next year. So it's really worth it. Wage increases are definitely a way that you can get people to come back from year to year. However, very important to be clear and transparent about your wage scale policies. On our farm, we have a wage scale, like our wage increases are really based on seniority. So it's not based on experience necessarily. So it's except for experience on our own farm. Therefore, everybody can see how much you would make on year 3. And it's just very clear. Opportunities to grow with the business, management, cooperative ownership, complementary business on the property. These are all ways that can encourage people to stay with your business. So on our farm, we're a cooperative. So we do a cooperative training and how it is that you could maybe join the cooperative if that's something that interests you. So that's one thing that can motivate people. But yeah, I've definitely heard other farms that might allow people to have side projects. Somebody might want to, maybe this farm only does summer production, but you have an employee that's interested in selling at a winter market. And so you allow them to take on that project, different side projects, or perhaps it's like you're a vegetable farm, but an employee has an interest in having some laying hens, something like that. Being open to these kinds of side projects can also be a way to encourage people to stay from year to year. Taking note of your staff's strengths and supporting them in finding off-season work in the area. I definitely think it's great to look at what different strengths your employees have. We definitely have a lot of people on our team that are coming from different areas, and I usually find myself thinking, especially when we have a really strong employee that I want to have them come back next year, I'm like, what else do they do? What could I get them involved in? For example, we have this one guy who had more of a background in programming, and like he was really strong in so many other elements. And I was like, maybe he'd be interested in helping us with a little bit of website work in the winter. That would just, or somebody else had some graphic design work, like just bringing people in with some of their other past skills. Sometimes they're really happy to, help out, and it allows them to shine as well on the farm because it's a skill that maybe you don't have, and it pulls them in. And sometimes that's a way to get them even more engaged with your farm. So I definitely encourage that. What else do we have here? Supporting your farm staff and finding affordable year-round housing in your area. Yeah, that's for sure important. Because usually you live on your farm and you're more connected to the network of people that might have, you might know of different options. Definitely important to get people connected to areas that they can find housing. Jasmine, do you have something that you wanted to say about retention?
Yeah, absolutely. I, as you noted as well, there like the opportunities and benefits to returning employees are numerous. We had just last year out of 14 employees, 13 returned, which was incredible. And it also allowed, us to make some other developments on the farm. It allowed more time that we weren't spending on that baseline training with people to do some other projects that we had been waiting to do for years. So yeah, I think we focus really heavy on what do employees want to do? What is their passion? What strengths we can play to? And yeah, I think both letting people dig into figuring out the efficiency techniques in both the tasks they already have and developing their skills, like you mentioned too, giving them like a long-term outlook as well is really, really beneficial because it's sort of like almost a little bit like dangling the carrot, right? It's like there's, more like tractor work in year 2 or 3. These things are really valuable, right? And yeah, I'm trying to think about what some other folks we had, but yeah, I think that's just really key. Like you need to touch base with your staff and find out what instead of just you're coming in the morning and here's what you're gonna do every day, like looking at your team as what they are, which is team members with individual like skills and experience and a wealth of other skills that they can bring to your team. So um yeah, and make it worth their while is I think my closing note on there. If the people will stay, if you offer them good employment with a living wage. So
Absolutely. I think also it's important to seed the seed of retention a little bit early on. So you don't want to save this for like the last couple weeks of their work. You want to
yeah.
start talking about it early in the fall. If you have an employee that you think is really great, you want them to come back next year, start that conversation earlier. Start talking to them about, hey, have you been thinking about next year? Are there some things on the farm that you would rather, that you would like to learn? What are, get them involved in the conversation. What are some of the things you'd like to be learning next year? Get to just start getting them to think about what next year could look like. And I think that's definitely worked for us. Brianna, you can move to the next slide, please.
Okay, we're going to move now into our Q&A. So we have a few questions that people have put in the chat. The first question from Ken we already answered. I'm actually, first of all, I'm going to stop the recording. So if anybody wants to unmute, they can feel comfortable to